Okay, welcome. We are now continuing on in Isaiah, part 2. We are going to go to Isaiah chapter 43 tonight in this third segment of this part 2 of Isaiah. And go to Isaiah chapter 43. We'll continue on where we left off from last week. Isaiah 43 verse 1 starts out, "But now, says Yahweh, your creator, O Jacob." But now. Okay, when you see that phrase, again, anytime in the Bible, but now, it usually tells you, it's almost like a therefore, well, something happened in the past that we want to go back to. So, this section that we're going to look at, and actually this kind of the whole topics that we will look at cover chapters 43, 44, 45, 46, 47, and 48. And we're going to cover it over 3 sessions, these chapters. This shows God's redemption of his people. This section comes after what the prophecy we just read at the end of chapter 42. In chapter 42, we read that God's people, that his servant Israel, were blind. They were trusting in other gods, and therefore they were laid waste. They were plundered, despoiled. They had become a prey with none to deliver. Let's go back and look at this that we saw last time in Isaiah 42, verse 14. We'll just read through this again. "I have kept silent for a long time. I kept still and restrained myself. Now like a woman in labor I will groan. I will both gasp and pant. I will lay waste the mountains and hills and wither all their vegetations. I will make rivers into coastlands and dry up the ponds. I will lead the blind by a way they do not know and paths they do not know. I will guide them. I will make darkness into light before them and rugged places into plains. These are things that I will do, and I will not leave them undone. They will be turned back and be utterly put to shame who trust in idols, who say to molten images, 'You are our gods.'" It is, again, because of idolatry that this is going to come upon God's people. "Hear, you deaf, and look, you blind, that you may see. Who is blind but my servant?" Here, my servant is the people, Israel. "Or so deaf as my messenger whom I send? Who is so blind as he that is at peace with me, or so blind as the servant of Yahweh? You have seen many things, but you don't observe them. Your ears are open, but none hears. Yahweh was pleased for his righteousness' sake to make the law great and glorious. But this is a people plundered and despoiled. All of them are trapped in caves or hidden away in prisons. They have become a prey with none to deliver, and a spoil with none to say, 'Give them back.' Who among you will give ear to this? Who will give heed and listen hereafter? Who gave Jacob up for a spoil and Israel to plunderers? Was it not Yahweh against whom we have sinned, and in whom ways we were not willing to walk, and whose law they did not obey? So he poured out on him the heat of his anger, and the fierceness of battle. It set him aflame all around, yet he did not recognize it, and it burned him, but he paid no attention." Again, they turn to idolatry, and they're plundered. They are like a prey with none to deliver. They are laid waste. They are despoiled. These truths about the nation of Israel have been revealed to them throughout the Scriptures, time and time and time again. These truths about the people of God. It's very simple. If they put their trust in Yahweh, they would be blessed. However, if they forsake the commandments of God and follow other gods, there will be consequences for their disobedience. When God first called Israel, delivered them out of Egypt, the book of Deuteronomy gives the last words that Moses spoke to the people before they went into the promised land. These words in Deuteronomy ring so clear throughout the rest of the Old Testament, and even today. The truths about what God said, how he expected his people to live, and what would happen. In Deuteronomy 28, we can go ahead and turn there. You can keep a ribbon here in chapter 42 or 43. Deuteronomy 28 gives the curse and the blessing. If you do this, you will be cursed. If you do this, you will be blessed. And I wanted to kind of look at the curse, because we're talking about a nation here that's not doing very well in chapter 42. But this is the truth that God said, and this was written, Deuteronomy was written almost, you got 350 years of Judges, you got another 400, it's almost 1,000 years, 800 to 1,000 years before what we're reading here in Isaiah. This was the truth that God set forward, and it's unchangeable. This truth is the truth. And in Deuteronomy 28, he gives them the blessing and then he gives them the curse. And let's pick up on the curse side of this in 28 verse 58. If you are not careful to observe all the words of this law which are written in this book, to fear this honored and awesome name, Yahweh your God, then Yahweh will bring extraordinary plagues upon you and your descendants, even severe and lasting plagues and miserable and chronic sicknesses. He will bring back on you all the diseases of Egypt, which you were afraid, and they will cling to you. Also every sickness and every plague, which is not written in the book of this law, Yahweh will bring on you until you are destroyed. Then you will be left in few in number, whereas you are numerous as the stars of heaven, because you did not obey Yahweh your God. And it shall come about that as Yahweh delighted over you to prosper you and multiply you, so Yahweh will delight over you to make you perish and destroy you. And you will be torn from the land wherein you are entering to possess it. Moreover, Yahweh will scatter you among all the peoples, from one end of the earth to the other end of the earth. And there you shall serve other gods, wood and stone, which you or your fathers have not known. Among those nations you shall find no rest. There will be no resting place for the sole of your foot, because Yahweh will give you a trembling heart, failing of eyes, and despair of soul. So your life will hang in doubt before you, and you will be in dread day and night, and shall have no assurance of your life. This is what God told him. If you disobey me and you follow other gods, you are going to get the curse. This will come upon you. Now, the nation of Israel in many times experienced some of this throughout their history. Just look at the book of Judges. The book of Judges, everything's going great, they're doing good. Then they follow other gods. They go into captivity, they get distressed, they get in trouble. Then they cry to God, and he brings up a judge and delivers them. That happened for over 350 years, over and over. It was just a seesaw, roller coaster, up and down, up and down. Same thing throughout the kings. When they had a king that worshiped God and brought them to a relationship with Yahweh, they did great. When they had a king that led them into idolatry, they got in trouble. It happened throughout their entire history as a nation and as a people. And now here in Isaiah, we are now going to the point where it's over. This is going to come to an end. These things are going to happen, and you are going to get taken into captivity, and you are going to be like laid waste, plundered, despoiled, a prey with none to deliver. And this is just what God said would happen. He told them it would happen. And again, his mercy was displayed upon them over and over and over again. He brought them back. This is what continued to happen under their nation. At the time we're reading Isaiah, just a few years before what's written here, the northern kingdom of Israel was gone. It had been defeated, destroyed. The northern tribes, the 10 tribes, were led into captivity into Assyria. Also, Judah had suffered greatly, we saw in the first chapters of Isaiah, under the hands of the Assyrian. Then under King Hezekiah, they experienced a brief revival, brought back to God under King Hezekiah. And then under his son Manasseh, they again turned to idolatry. And actually, if you read about Manasseh, it says he made them to worship other gods and be worse than all the other nations around them. Their idolatry became worse than the heathen nations. So they were going downhill, and this was going to happen. At the current time, from what I understand in Isaiah that we are reading, this devastation that's talked about, and we're going to read more about this as we go through these chapters, had not yet taken place. They were not yet in this state of total desolation. This judgment that happens on Judah actually takes place during the Babylonian captivity over 100 years after the prophecy in Isaiah. All right? Now, while we're in Deuteronomy, go to Deuteronomy 30. So God prophesied in Deuteronomy, when he gave them the final words, that if you disobey, this is what's going to happen to you. But God also proclaimed to them, if you disobey, and if you get taken into captivity, wherever you are taken around the whole world, if you'll turn back to me, I'll bring you back home. I'll redeem you. I will bring you back. Deuteronomy chapter 30, verse 7. So it shall be, when all of these things have come upon you, the blessing and the curse, which I have set before you, and you call them to mind in all the nations where Yahweh your God has banished you, and you return to Yahweh your God and obey him with all your heart and soul, according to all I command you today, you and your sons, then Yahweh your God will restore you. He'll redeem you from captivity and have compassion on you, and will gather you again from all the peoples where Yahweh your God has scattered you. If your outcasts are in the ends of the earth, right into the coastlands, from there Yahweh your God will gather you, and from there he will bring you back. Yahweh your God will bring you into the land which your fathers possessed, and you shall possess it. And he will prosper you and multiply you more than your fathers. Moreover, Yahweh your God will circumcise your heart and the heart of your descendants to love Yahweh your God with all your heart, with all your soul, that you may live. So isn't that a beautiful figure? Circumcise your heart, that your heart is open to love God. He'll do this for you. And Yahweh your God will inflict all those curses on your enemies and on those who hate you and persecuted you. So, this is what God had promised. Not only does he declare judgment that would come upon his people, but he also promised after that judgment that there would be a redemption, a restoration, if they repent. And he also promised in that redemption that the persecutors of the people of God would be punished. They would receive punishment. This is exactly what God said would happen way back in Deuteronomy. And now here Isaiah, over 800 years later, is telling the nation the same truth. He's telling them the same thing. Now, Isaiah 43. If I had the theme for tonight, it would be the awesome, eternal counsel of Yahweh. How he says what was, it was. He says what is, it is. And he says what will be, it will be. This is our God. And he so proclaims who he is through his counsel and through his word and his prophecy. And his prophetic word is absolute. And it really is a dynamic section of Scripture. Now, here in Isaiah, in this chapter 43, not only does God declare the punishment for idolatry, but he also prophesies of the promised redemption. Now, I want to go back to the timeline we looked at last week, which you have here. Now, the time that Isaiah is writing, he died sometime during the reign of King Manasseh. Probably early on, because he'd already been prophesying for over 50 years by the time King Manasseh came into power. So somewhere during this reign of Manasseh, Isaiah the prophet died. All right? This captivity that he's prophesying about, that we're going to read about, doesn't happen for another 100 years. It happens under King Zedekiah, when the Babylonians, King Nebuchadnezzar, comes in and takes them into captivity. Understand, the Assyrians are still the great empire. The Babylonians are not in power yet. The Babylonian Empire was not in power. The Assyrians were still in power. And we're going to read this, that he's talking about the Babylonians, which happens 100 years from now. Then they are in captivity for 70 more years in Babylon. All right? 70 more years they're in captivity in Babylon. And then they are brought under King Cyrus back into Israel, and they get the redemption back into the land. All right? Again, we're going to read about this. This is future history. It happens just like Isaiah says, and we look back at it and says, oh, he's talking about that incident. Well, he was talking about the incident 170 years before the incident took place. It's just, it is amazing. I understand why people think this section of Isaiah was written afterwards, because it's just too perfect. But as we're going to see in this section, the emphasis is the everlasting God calls things out before they happen. And he is God, and nobody else is God. And that's the whole point of this. And if you miss that point in this section, you're really missing what God is emphasizing about his nature in this section. And that's why to understand this is prophecy about the future destruction and the future deliverance that's going to happen. So, let's look at Isaiah 43. But now, thus says Yahweh, your creator, O Jacob, and he who formed you, O Israel. Do not fear, for I have redeemed you. I have called you by name. You are mine. When you pass through the waters, I'll be with you. And through the rivers, they will not overflow you. When you walk through the fire, you will not be scorched, nor will the flame burn you. Again, we're going to see that I talked about last week, the Hebrew parallelism. It's really it opens so much understanding to understand what he's talking about. Here you have this parallelism. Through the waters, I'll be with you. Through the rivers, they won't overflow you. You see that parallel? You walk through the fire, you won't be scorched. In the flame, it's not going to burn you. You see that? Again, this parallel comes up again. Verse 3. For I am Yahweh your God, the Holy One of Israel, your Savior. I have given Egypt as your ransom, Cush and Seba in your place. Since you are precious in my sight, since you are honored and I love you, I will give other men in your place and other people in exchange for your life. Again, here is it. Who is Cush and Seba? People aren't quite sure, but they're pretty sure Cush is a representation of Ethiopia, southern Egypt at this time. Seba is probably another word for Egypt, or some think it might be the nation of Sheba, which is today Yemen, which is across on the very tip of Arabia. You go across the Red Sea, and all this is considered the region of Egypt when he's writing here. But the way you understand it is the parallelism. Again, the parallelism is, I've given Egypt as your ransom, and the parallel is Cush and Seba in your place. You see that? Cush and Seba is another way to talk about this region of Egypt. Cush, here, he says that in place of you receiving the punishment, Egypt's going to pay the punishment for you. Now, interestingly, historically, and we're going to get into this whole thing about Cyrus, Cyrus did not punished Israel. In fact, he brought redemption to Israel. He brought them back to their nation, had their temple rebuilt, had Jerusalem walls rebuilt under the Persian kings. And his son Cambyses went down and defeated Egypt. Defeated the Egyptians, and I just found this out, that after Cambyses, I guess before this time, all the Egyptian leaders from all the dynasties of Egypt were native born, all right, through their dynasties. Once the Persians came into Egypt and the son of Cyrus defeated them, the leaders in Egypt from then on were people from other nations. They were satraps of, other nations ruled Egypt from that point on. And so it basically says they're going to pay the price for you. I think of the ransom, and they'll take your place. I think of the movie Last of the Mohicans, and they're going to take Daughter of the White Hair and take her, and then Hawkeye says, "Take me." Of course, he can't speak the language, so the British soldier says, "Take me, take me." So then he takes the place of being killed in behalf of, anyways, a ransom. They're going to be the ransom for you. All right. So that's the section there. Now verse 5. Do not fear, for I am with you. And I will bring your offspring from the east and gather you from the west. I will say to the north, give them up, and to the south, do not hold them back. Bring my sons from afar and my daughters from the ends of the earth. Everyone who is called by my name, whom I have created for my glory, whom I have formed, even whom I have made. They haven't been taken into captivity yet. But after they are taken into captivity, we're going to bring them back. Now, verse 8. Bring out the people who are blind, even those who have eyes, even though they have eyes, and deaf, even though they have ears. All the nations gather together, so that the peoples may be assembled. Who among them can declare this and proclaim to us the former things? Let them present their witness that they may be justified, or let them hear and say it is true. You are my witnesses, declares Yahweh, and my servant whom I have chosen, so that you may know and believe me and understand that I am He. Before me, there was no God formed. There is none like me. I, even I, am Yahweh. There is no Savior besides me. It is I who have declared and saved and proclaimed. There are no strange gods among you. So you are my witnesses, declares the Lord. I am God. Even from eternity, I am He. And there is none who can deliver out of my hand. I act, who can reverse it? See, God declares about Himself here. I'm showing you these things so that you know I am God. I am Yahweh. I am God. There is no other one. I'm the only one. All right? Verse 14. Thus says Yahweh. Thus says Yahweh, your Holy One. Well, thus says Yahweh, your Redeemer, the Holy One of Israel. For your sake, I have sent to Babylon, and I will bring them all down as fugitives, even the Chaldeans into ships in which they will rejoice. I'm going to bring down Babylon. Babylon wasn't up yet when he's writing this. Remember the timeline? Look back. Okay, look at the timeline again. Isaiah is writing up here somewhere between 696, 641 BC. Babylon doesn't take them into captivity until 586 BC. And yet here he's saying, I'm bringing down Babylon. Babylon's going to come down. Verse 15. I am Yahweh, your Holy One, the Creator of Israel, your King. Thus says Yahweh, who makes a way through the sea. Now look at this, is beautiful here. Who makes a way through the sea and a path through the mighty waters. Who brings forth the chariot and the horse, the army and the mighty man. They will lie down together and not rise again. They have been quenched and extinguished like a wick. Now when you read verse 16 and 17, what do you think about with God? I think of crossing the Red Sea. He split the Red Sea, brought them in deliverance, and the chariots, remember, they followed with the chariots. Water went back on, and all the host of Egypt was destroyed in the river, distinguished like a wick. You know, you just see God just said, they're gone. They're done. This is God of the past, right? This is what God has done. This is what he did in the past. He split the waters, he opened, they passed up. Verse 18, he says, do not call to mind the former things or ponder things of the past. Behold, I'm going to do something new. Remember, I split the water, brought deliverance to the people of God, brought them back into their land through the splitting of the sea. I'm going to do something new, though. Now it will spring forth. Will you not be aware of it? Are you not going to understand I'm going to do this? I am going to make a roadway in the wilderness. Rivers in the desert. The beasts and the jackals will glorify me, the jackals and ostriches, because I have given water in the wilderness, rivers in the deserts to drink by my chosen people. The people whom I have formed for myself will declare my praise. Now what's he talking about? As far as I understand, when Cyrus, that we're going to read about, came in and bring deliverance, there was no roadway through that didn't happen yet. You know when this happens? It hasn't happened yet. This is going to happen in the end. When he dries up he's going to dry up the Euphrates River, the kings of the east are coming through. And he's going to make, the deserts are going to blossom. Water's going to be where water isn't anymore. This hasn't happened yet. So in these two verses, God shows his eternal greatness. I did this, and I'm going to do something I haven't done yet. I mean, so when you read Isaiah, God is God. And I want to bring you back to a chart that I showed in the last session, because this is just God's judgments and God's deliverance. He talks about the past like it just happened. And he talks about the current situation. He talks about the near future. He talks about the extended future. And he talks about the final judgment. On the deliverance side, he talks about his past deliverance. He talks about currently what's delivering. He talks about the near future, the extended future, and the final deliverance. And he talks about these things in the same context. Because he's God. He is the one who was, who is, and who is to come. And he speaks about these things. So here, he brings you back to the deliverance across the Red Sea. And he says, I'm going to do something new. I'm going to dry up these waters and bring deliverance. And there's going to be rivers in the desert where there are no rivers right now. And now, verse 22, we're going to go to the present. Yet you haven't called by me. Now he's directly talking to the people in the present. But you haven't called on me, O Jacob. Look at this, I'm God. Look at, I did this in the past, I'm going to do this in the future, but you don't call on me. You know, you got these idols you're jumping around with, you don't call on me. You have become weary of me, or you've become weary of me, O Israel. You haven't brought to me sheep for your burnt offerings. You haven't honored me with your sacrifices. I haven't burdened you with offerings, nor wearied you with incense. I think what he's saying here is, I didn't ask you to do these things as a burden to you. I didn't ask you to do these things to be a wearisome thing to you. I wanted you to do it because I loved you and that you loved me. But you don't even think of me. You don't even think of me. You didn't bring me sweet cane with money. You haven't filled me with the fat of your sacrifices. Rather, you have burdened me. You've burdened me. You know what you brought to me? Your sins. You've wearied me with your iniquities. Even I am the one who wipes out your transgressions. Look, the reason I gave you those sacrifices so I could redeem you, so I could, bring you back. For my own sake, and I will not remember your sins. Put me in remembrance. Let us argue our case together. State your cause that you may be proved right. Verse 27. Again, an interesting section here. For your first father sinned, and your spokesmen have transgressed against me. Now, the first forefather, as far as I understand, is Abraham. Actually, if you keep a finger here in 51:2, he calls the father, Abraham is their father. 51:2, he says, look to Abraham, your father. 51:2. There's other places where he talks about forefathers in the plural, and that I can understand. I mean, the forefathers. But here if this is Abraham, I'm okay with that because Abraham sinned. Abraham he wasn't always perfect. Your first father sinned. If it was forefathers, it'd be a lot easier for me to deal with that. But I'm okay with Abraham too because he was, he lied, right, about about things. I mean, he wasn't perfect. And if it goes back to him before he had called him, remember, he was an idolater in the land of Ur of the Chaldees. God called Abraham. So he was an idolater even before God had redeemed him. And your spokesmen have transgressed against me. Now, who is this? Who are the spokesmen? Well, I think the spokesmen at this time are the priests and the prophets. The false priests, the priests and the false prophets who are speaking against God. So I will pollute the princes of the sanctuary. I will consign to Jacob the ban and Israel the revilement. If you keep a finger here, look at in Isaiah 9, way back, it talks a little bit about these spokesman. Isaiah 9, verse 14. It says, so Yahweh cuts off the head and tail from Israel, both palm branch and bulrush in a single day. The head is the elder and honorable man, and the prophet who teaches falsehood is the tail. For those who guide his people are leading them astray, and those who are guided by them are brought to confusion. These spokesmen were leading the people of God away. You could put in your notes, I don't have it there, Jeremiah 5:31. You'll see the same thing Jeremiah speaks about, that the prophets and priests speak falsely. And it says, and the people liked it that way. They liked that they told them nice things. But these false prophets led them to idolatry, to idolatrous practices. Here he says, consign to the ban, or consign means to give over. And the word ban, I think in the King James it says the curse. Does it say the curse? And it really, it's the curse or the cursed thing, and that's why it's the ban. I've given you over to the curse. Again, keep a finger here. This stuff is just Deuteronomy 13. Deuteronomy 13. Deuteronomy 13. Now, Deuteronomy 13, we're not going to read the whole chapter, but it starts out with him saying, if a prophet speaks, he looks like, what it says, but if that prophet that's leading you says, come follow other gods, don't follow that prophet. Matter of fact, kill that prophet. And then he goes on to say, if your mother or your brother or your sister or your wife tells you to go after other gods, that's not a good thing. Don't do that. And here in verse 12, it goes on and says, if you hear in one of your cities, which Yahweh your God is giving you to live in, someone saying, some worthless men have gone out from among you and have seduced the inhabitants of their city, saying, let us go and serve other gods, whom you have not known. Then you shall investigate and search out and inquire thoroughly. If it is true, the matter established that this abomination has been done among you, you shall surely strike the inhabitants of that city with the edge of the sword, utterly destroying it, and all that is in it, and its cattle, and the edge of the sword. Then you shall gather all its booty into the middle of its open square, and burn the city, and all its booty with fire, as a whole burnt offering to Yahweh your God, and it shall be a ruin forever. It should never be rebuilt. Nothing from that which is put under the ban, under the curse, shall cling to your hand, in order that Yahweh may turn from his burning anger and show mercy to you, and have compassion on you, and make you increase as he has sworn to you. So there was God's promise. Look, if these people lead you to follow other gods, and if in this city, then the curse is going to come upon them. And here in Isaiah he says, I will pollute the princes. I will consign to Jacob the ban, and then the parallelism, and to Israel the revilement. They will be reviled. Look at Ezekiel. I give it Psalm 79 is really all about the God's revilement of the people that when they don't follow him. But I love this one in Ezekiel 5. I don't know if I love it. I think it speaks to this understanding of revival. Ezekiel 5, verse 14. Again, talking about them when they go after other gods and they get into idolatry and falsehoods and they don't follow the commandments of God. Ezekiel 5:14. Moreover, I will make you a desolation and a reproach among nations which surround you in the sight of all who pass by. So it will be a reproach, a reviling, a warning, and an object of horror to the nations who surround you when I execute judgment against you in anger, wrath, and rage's rebuke. I, Yahweh, have spoken. That's what he told them. If you continue down this path where you don't trust me, this is what's going to happen to you. To Jacob is going to go the curse, and to Israel the revilement. You are going to become this. Back to Isaiah 44. Do you see how this is a roller coaster? It goes up, and then he brings it down. Up. Okay, now we're down again, right? Chapter 44. But now, I love, but wait, there's more. It's not over yet. But now, listen, O Jacob, my servant, and Israel, whom I've chosen. Thus says Yahweh, who made you, who formed you from the womb, who will help you. Do not fear, O Jacob, my servant, and Jeshurun, whom I have chosen. This again is a parallelism. Jeshurun is the word means upright one, and here it's talking about Israel. Jacob, my servant, Jeshurun, whom I have chosen. For I will pour out water on the thirsty land, and streams on the dry ground. I will pour out my spirit on your offspring, and my blessing on your descendants. And they will spring up among the grass like poplars by streams of water. This one will say, I am Yahweh's. And that one will call on the name of Jacob. And another one will write on his hand, belonging to Yahweh. And will name Israel's name with honor. Isn't that beautiful? So God keeps on. Thus says Yahweh, the King of Israel and his Redeemer, Yahweh of hosts. I am the first, and I am the last. There is no God beside me. Who is like me? Let him proclaim and declare it. Yes, let him recount it to me in order. From the time that I established the ancient nation, and let them declare to them the things that are coming and the events that are going to take place. Let someone else tell you what I'm telling you. Let someone else give you the perfection of what I'm going to prophetically speak to you, like I'm saying it's going to happen. Do not tremble and do not be afraid. Have not I long since announced it to you? I told you these things back in Deuteronomy. And I'm still telling to you today, and now this is going to happen to you. And you are my witnesses. Is there any God beside me? Is there any rock? I know of none. There's nobody like me. There's no one that can do what I do. I'm God. So he gives this great declaration of God. And now verse 9. The contrast now. This is what you guys making these idols. This is what you have here. 9. Those who fashion a graven image are all of them futile. And their precious things are of no profit. Even their own witnesses fail to see or know, so that they will be put to shame. Who has fashioned a god or cast an idol to no profit. Behold, all his companions will be put to shame. For the craftsmen themselves were mere men. The people that made the idols, they're just men. The people that captivate you into idolatrous practices and put things before you that bring you into idolatry, they're just men. Let them all assemble themselves. Let them stand up. Let them tremble. Let them together be put to shame. Look, here's what a man does. A man shapes iron into cutting tool and does his work over the coals, fashioning it with hammers and working it with a strong arm. He also gets hungry, and his strength fails. He drinks no water and becomes weary. Okay, this is the guy making the idols gets tired and he has to put his tools down. Another one shapes wood. Ooh, he takes wood. And he extends a measuring line. He outlines it with red chalk. He works it with planes and outlines it with a compass and makes it like the form of a man, like the beauty of a man, so that it may sit in a house. He makes a nice image so that it could sit in a house. Ooh, isn't this cool? Surely he cuts cedars for himself and takes a cypress or an oak and raises it for himself among the trees of the forest. He plants a fir, and the rain makes it grow. Then it becomes something for a man to burn. So he takes one of them and warms himself. So he takes the same wood that he's been making out, and he burns it in a fire. And he makes fire to bake bread. He also makes a god, and he worships it. And he makes its graven image and fall down before it. Half of it he burns in the fire. Over this half he eats and meats as he roasts a roast and is satisfied. He also warms himself and says, "Aha, I am warm. I have seen the fire." But the rest of it he makes into a god, a graven image. He falls down before it and worships it. And he prays to it and says to it, "Deliver me, for you are my God." They do not know. They don't understand. He smeared over their eyes so they cannot see, their hearts so they cannot comprehend. No one recalls, nor there is knowledge or understanding to say, "I have burned half of it in the fire, and have half baked bread over its coals. I roast meat and eat it. Then I make the rest of it into an abomination. I fall down before a block of wood." He feeds on ashes. A deceived heart has turned himself. He cannot deliver himself, nor say, "Is there not a lie in my right hand? Is there not something wrong here?" What a beautiful, that's idolatry. That is the stupidity. We look at this and we joke about the wood, but we got idols in our life that are just as stupid. They're just as stupid. The things that we put our time and our energy into, most of it is made by men, that men have put in front of us. Sinful men and they put things, the systems of this world, put things in our path. And here in this whole section, God says, look it, I tell you things that haven't happened yet. I tell you things that happened. I told you 1,000 years ago. I'm the everlasting God. How can you even compare what I can do and what I'm going to do for you? So after the break, we're going to come back and look at what he does do and his promise. And this is amazing prophecy about Cyrus, king of Persia, who hadn't even been born yet or thought of. And yet the everlasting God is going to reveal just amazing truths. Like I say, this at this time is future history of something that had not yet taken place. All right? So we'll see that after the break.